Okay. So we're holding another Gemara that's discussing if how long is the Dimois Mashiach? How long are the days of Mashiach? So we have different opinions that we brought so far. We brought down a Rabbi Eliezer that said 40 years, corresponding to the 40 years the Jewish people in the desert. And now we're going to see the same Rabbi Eliezer if it's an argument with regard to the 40 years. So here we're holding Tanya Idach. We learned another brisa that says like this. Rabbi Eliezer says, hey Aaron, Rabbi Eliezer says, Avi, you might say Mashiach, the days of Mashiach are Boim Shana 40 years. How do we know? So he has a verse. It says over here, V'ya'ancha, v'ya'arivecha, v'ya'achilcha. It's talking about the man. That it says that, and he afflicted you and suffered you to hunger and fed you with the man. So from here we see that there's 40. That was 40 years in the desert, and then it says, Samchenu kimais inisanu shnais ra'inu ra. Make us glad according to the days that you afflicted us. So if you afflicted us 40 years with the man, that's a verse. We're not going to get into that verse, what that verse means, what's the affliction of the man. But you afflicted us with the man. So make us happy to correspond to the days that you afflicted us. So if there's 40 years of the man, there's 40 years of the Maisa Mashiach. The happiness over here is referring to the days of Mashiach. Reb Dosa says that it's Arba Meyos Shana. That if we're already talking about affliction, so we're not talking about the affliction of the 40 years of eating the man. However, we're talking about 400 years. Why? Because it says Va'avodim v'inu oisam Arba Meyos Shana, that you had them serve and afflicted them for 400 years, which is the 400 years that the Jewish people, this is the promise, so to say, or the covenant that Avram had with God, that's going to be a 400 years exile in Egypt. So it says, and then we have Samachenu Kimaisi Nisanu. They make us glad according to the days they afflicted us. So if we were afflicted for 400 years, starting from the birth of Yitzchak in Egypt, so too should have 400 years of the Yemaisa Mashiach, the days of Mashiach. The difference between Rabbi Eliezer and the first Rabbi Eliezer is not in the years, whether it's 40 years in the desert or 40 years of the man. It's just a question of what verse. That's what most people say. What verse we're using as the proof? Is it about the man, or is it about Heshoki? Is it 99a? Is it about the man, or is it about the actual time in the desert? It says the connection. It's brought down. The Mashal says, what's the connection of the 40 years of the desert with the days of Mashiach specifically? So he says because we sinned. So we didn't go right away into the Geula. And those 40 years kind of that we were in should have been times that we were in the days of Mashiach. And so therefore it comes back later to be the 40 years of Mashiach. That's what the Mashal says. He says, if they wouldn't have sinned in the desert, so then we would have had, sorry if the sound isn't great. So then we would have had we would run right away into Eretz Yisrael, and those 40 Hebrews, and we're 99a, and those 40 years they should have been good years. We should have had those good years in Eretz Yisrael. Instead, we spend them in the desert. So to make up for the 40 years that we, so to say, suffered in the desert, so therefore we're going to have them with the days of Mashiach. So says the Marsha. Rabbeinu HaKadosh says, the author of the Mishnah, that it is shloish meyos v'shishim v'chamishana. Again, we have to figure out these Gemaras according to the 6,000 years. If it goes into the 6,000 years, the Gemara we learned until now is that there's 6,000 years Havi Olma. If we're talking about when these Yemaisa Mashiach are, that has to be figured out exactly, because once we reach 400 years or 350 years, that's already into the time we're now. We're now 250 years away from the 6,000th year. So he said, and we're definitely not in the days of Mashiach right now. So Rebbe says, Shloish Me'as v'shishim v'chameshana. It's going to be 365 years. Why? Corresponding to the days of the solar calendar, not the lunar. Although the Jewish people count by a lunar calendar, which is 357, 58 days, but we're counting over here according to the days of the solar calendar. Like the days of the solar calendar, as it says, because it says, for the day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed is to come. And a year is 365 days. Now, according to some opinions, are going to say that Rebbe learns that it's every day by God is 1,000 years, so it's 365,000 years. But let's see what Rashi says. Rashi says Rebbe Omer Shin Samachay 365. Shin is 300, Samach is 60, and Hey is 5. Kiminyan Yemai Sachama, according to the days of the solar calendar. Dechsiv, as it says, Hiyayim Nakam Belibi Vishnasku Uliba. So the day of vengeance and the day of redemption is going to come. Like Rashi says in the brackets, Liyayim Nakim Shal Meraglim, Arboim Yoim, Ma Yoim Nakim Shal Meraglim, Shana Achas B'cho Yoim, Yoim Lishana, Yoim Lishana. So he says, just like, so it has 365 years, it should be 365 days. So just like by the spies, for their 40 days in the desert every day, 40 days in their mission of spying, they spent a year in the desert per day. So too, per day of the 365 days of the year, each day represents a year, and therefore will be 365 years. Like the Meraglim, like the spies, had to stay 40 years corresponding to the 40 days. Shana achas b'chol yoim. Yoim l'shana, yoim l'shana. Like God told them in Bamidbar, after they sinned with the spies, that they're going to have to be in the desert a day per year. Kach shnas geula, so too the years of redemption. Ba shana liyoim, shana liyoim. Shelekol yoim v'yoim shal shana zu haksuva shnas geula b'mikra neistim shana achas. For every, it says that my day of redemption, my year of redemption, it's going to be a year per each day of redemption. So that's one opinion. One opinion that Rashi brings down is that Rebbe says it's going to be, the days of Mashiach will be 365 years corresponding to 365 days of the solar calendar, 1 year per day. The Istigar say, there are those who say that once we're already going out of the literal translation of 365 days, so there's those who say no, that we're not talking about 365 years. Istigar say that those who hold Shesa Alafim Shana, 365,000 years. Just like by God it says in Tehillim 90 that for God 1,000 years is like a day. So if we're talking about 365 days, for God that's 365,000 years. Okay, so either Rebbe is talking about that the Yemos Mashiach will be 365,000 years or be 365 years. We're going to see in a second what does it mean, Yom Nakim Belibi. What does it mean that in my heart is vengeance? So he says, first Rabbi Steinsaltz says over here, in other sources, which he quotes from Rashi, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is quoted as saying the duration of the Messianic era will be 365,000 years, corresponding to a full year of the days of the God, of days of God, based on the verse for 1,000 years in your eyes are but like yesterday, which means 1 day for 1,000 years. In the Medrash, an opinion is cited that the duration of the Messianic era will be 354,000 years, a full lunar year of days of God. So the question is if it's a lunar or a solar, 354, 365. Sorry, it was not 358, it's 365. There's 11 days between, we learned that in Rosh Hashanah, between a solar and a lunar year. That's where we have the leap year. So, but either or, we're talking about a long time. So 365,000 or 354,000 is a long time. My Yom Nakam Belibi. Again, over here, what I have over here is not exactly, doesn't have all the mefarshim, all the commentaries, but there's the commentaries do tackle the question of how this corresponds to the 6,000 years of the world existing, and the seventh year is going to be like 1,000 years of what we had the opinions of 1,000 years of nothingness, or 2,000 years of nothingness. Knowing this, most commentaries hold that there's no disagreement on that. We're going to get into why this is important in a second. My Yom Nakam Libi, what does it mean for the day of vengeance is in my heart? Why is it in my heart? What does it mean by heart? What does it mean by heart of God? So Rabbi Yochanan says, Libi Galisi. I only revealed in my heart the days of the coming of Mashiach. Leivarai loigalisi, to my limbs I didn't reveal. Means the heart is more hidden, a more hidden place, right? A person could feel something and try to hold it in. If you're already starting to express it in your body, your body language. So if God's body language gave off the day of Mashiach, that would be more revealing. But if God keeps it in his heart and doesn't let his body language, so to say, we're going to see in a second, obviously God doesn't have a body, but we're talking about how we understand expression of things, of something, how it's kept in the heart versus something kept being expressed by the body. So too, God has different levels of revelation. Reb Shimon ben Lakish Amar, Libi Gilisi, that I only revealed it within my heart. He's even saying it's even more hidden. That not only has it not expressed itself in body language or speech, some others say body language here means speech, but even the angels don't know the day of Mashiach. We have the famous Rashi, we know clearly of our forefathers. Yaakov knew the Kates. There are those who knew the Kates. There's special tzaddikim that know more information, obviously, than the angels know. But it's a very well kept hidden secret. Rashi says, Le'evarai loigalisi. He says, Shaloi hoitzaisi davar mipiv. I didn't let it go out of my mouth. So we see speech. That even my limbs shouldn't be able to hear. But in my heart, it was kept the day of redemption. Yes, Aaron.
Okay. So they say that
I can't hear. We can't hear you.
oh, okay. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hold on one second. Just give me what the... Okay, wait. Okay, you can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So they say that first part of the question is they say that if we keep two Shabbases, and there's other things we could do, that Mashiach will come right away. So they're giving us no hope, saying all these dates, saying that this is the only way. And why the second question is why the big discrepancy, if there is a calculated calendar, why the big discrepancy on how many days?
Okay, so there's two separate points that you're mentioning. One point is when Mashiach is coming and how long are the days of Mashiach. When Mashiach coming, we discussed already, there's the concept of Be'ita Achishana. Be'ita means in its time or in the hastened time. There's a deadline time that Mashiach has to come, and there's if we merit, it could come earlier. If we keep two Shabbosim, that's considered a merit that would bring the Mashiach immediately. As far as the days of Mashiach, each rabbi, like in many times in Talmud, have their tradition based on the verses that they've learned to understand how long are the days of Mashiach. So we're talking about, some say 40 years, some say 365 years, 365,000 years, etc. But these are based on the idea how, in general in learning in Talmud, how there's different traditions. We're going to see in a second that a person who's going to question the traditions of Torah is one who may not be welcome in the world to come. So let's see what Ravi Steinzalt says. It says, "Libi gelisi levar gelisi." I revealed to my heart, but I did not reveal to my limbs. The heart represents thought, and limbs represent speech. The dispute is that according to Rabbi Yochanan, this matter was revealed neither through speech nor through prophecy. While according to Rish Lakish, it was revealed. It was not revealed even to the ministering angels who can be informed without prophecy or speech. So the Yad Ramah. We're going to learn in a second. I'm going to bring up who the Yad Ramah is. We've mentioned him a lot, the Yad Ramah. The Yad Ramah is not, of course, the Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch. He's lived in the times, I think he was a drop younger than the Rambam, Maimonides, and why it's important that we know who he is. But he says that the difference between Reish Lakish, who says if the angels know, or if my body knows, if it's a question of speech, because even the angels can know something, even if it's not brought to the level of speech. Whereas according to Rabbi Yochanan, it was in thought but not speech, but could be according to Rabbi Yochanan, the angels do know it. Now we do know from different parts of prayer and davenings and midrashim what the angels know and don't know and how they acquire information. We have the famous piece in Yom Kippur davening when Rabbi Yishmael Kohen Gadol goes up to heaven and asks the angel if the decree is a decree, and he says what he heard behind the pargud, what he heard behind the curtain. So the angels have what they say, so to say, hear behind the curtain. Okay, so now we're going to continue. Tani Now, again, the Yad Ramah, who talks about this, he brings down the question of speech. He goes into the question. It's not. So, I mean, we know this already from Chassidic teachings of how we view, hey Danny, how we view the descriptions of God
Hi, Rabbi.
in the human body. So it says. So Yad Ramah says. He just uses a strong term. He says, "Chas v'sham sheish levei vorim." We can't say, of course, God has a heart or limbs. Shareine guf, leish lefisha guf, yesh leisoif, v'chol davar sheish leisoif, yesh lekoichai soif. God is not, a body has limitations. God is limitless. So obviously there's no such thing as body. So nevertheless, it's the way, it's only a mashal, an example. So we could try to understand the difference between levels of revelation. That the revelation of thought is a deeper, a more what's called olam diskasia, hidden worlds, where speech is the olam diskalia, is the revealed worlds. We find speech all the time. Vayomer Shema Moshe, Baruch Shamer V'haya Olam, etc. Okay, now, but the level is, what level of revelation is the date of the coming of Mashiach? A well-kept secret, as we could obviously tell, being 5,885 years in. Tani Avime Bered Rababo. Avime, the son of Rabbi Abo, said like this: Yimoisa Mashiach Yisrael Shivas Alofim Shana. So he ups it to 7,000 years. Shenemar, because it says because we have a verse in Yeshaya that says, like a bridegroom rejoices with the bride, which are the 7 days Sheva Brachas, right? The 7 days of festivities for a groom and a bride. So too, so too, God will rejoice with you. Meaning to say, 7 and every year for God is 1,000 years. So every year is 1,000 years. So 7 years is 7,000 years. Okay, so it's actually a lot less than obviously Rebbe's 365,000 years. So Rashi says, "Kimsais chasa and shivas yimei mishta ken yosis alayich shivas yamim v'yom shakadosh baruch hu elef shana." Like we said before, God a year for God is 1,000 years. So therefore, Avimi says Avimi says it's 1,000 years. There's just a small note that the Ein Yaakov says. Those who pay attention to the Eicha, right? A lot of the Eicha that we say in Tisha B'Av describe the Jewish people as an almana, a widow, and we know that an almana, a widow who gets married, doesn't have 7 days of festivities. She gets 3 days of festivities. There's an almana who gets married again to a person who's been married, so neither of them both of them have once celebrated Sheva Brachas, then they have 3 days of festivities. So why, if the Jewish people are compared to an almana, so why, as a widow, so why do we have 7 days of festivities? So then Yaakov says, is because not only will God sort of say that we know that days of Mashiach are going to be like a marriage, but we're going to go from being a widow to being like a virgin. And so we get upgraded to the level of a virgin, and therefore we have 7 days of festivities. Okay, Amr Rav Yehuda Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel. We're going to get to complicated Gemaras in a second, and we're going to see why it's important to know who the Yad Ramah is. I actually found this out by interesting, just Hashkacha Pratis. Amr Rav Yehuda Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says name of Shmuel. Yemois HaMashiach days Mashiach ki miyoim shenivra olam adachshav. Is as many days as the world has been created till now. Like it says, ki mei hashamayim alar. It's just like the heaven and the earth. So the God created heaven and earth. So too is going to be the days of Mashiach. So basically, let's say 5,785 years, or then it was obviously a few thousand years before when Rav Yehuda said that in the name of Shmuel. He says over here, from the days of the world was created until now. In other words, the day when Mashiach will come. When Mashiach comes, so you have to count when Mashiach comes backwards from the day of creation. As it stated that your days will be multiplied, and the days of your children in the land that the Lord swore to your fathers to give them, as in the days of heaven upon the earth, so too the days that the Lord gave us the land. So basically, the Mefarshim say that we're going to have the land. The part of the verse that's not quoted here, it says, "In the land that the Lord swore that to your fathers to give them." The Jewish people have not been that long in the land. Even if you count the years of the judges and the first temple and the second temple, it still hasn't been in all those days. So therefore, it has to be referring to another time. When is that other time? The other time is the days of Mashiach. So Rashi says, how long is the days of Mashiach? Is going to be from when the world was created till Mashiach comes. Count out those days. So today, if Mashiach Mir Hashem were to come today, So 5,785 years would be the days of Mashiach. Like it says, Rashi says the Jewish people never lived that long in the land. So when's that reverse referring to? Obviously not at the time when the Jewish people lived in the land, but referring to the time the Jewish people were in when the days of Mashiach. Okay. Rabbi Nachman says that he uses another verse that says Kimei Noach Adachshav, from counting not from Adam or first man or creation, but the days of Noach. That's the next big date in history, right? When Noach, because Noach was the flood. Noach kind of went to a new world. Both the world changed and the people changed. So there's a kind of a new beginning from Noach. And Rabbi Nachman uses a verse to support his opinion that says, Ki mei Noach zois, the waters of Noach, Asher Nishpati, that I swore will never come to the world again. The word ki mei, if you were to put the word ki mei together, it could also mean like the days. Ki mei literally means like the waters of Noach. But if you put it together, it could be like the days of Noach. So the days of Noach that I swore from Noach's times for the rest of the time that there would not be a flood, those are the amount of days there's going to be the days of Mashiach. Right? So that's like he says, so have I sworn that I will not be angry with you and rebuke you. These are referring to the days of Mashiach. The word kimei could mean like he says of Rabbi Steinsaltz kimei, meaning like the days. So Rashi quotes this idea that, and then we're finishing off this subject. And before we finish the subject of Mashiach, we're going to go into understanding the difference between Olam Haba and the days of Mashiach, the world to come. Everyone knows we talk about the world to come, and the days of Mashiach, they're not the same time. So it says this, Kimei Noach, Rashi says, Kimei Noach, it's as if it says the days of Noach. Kecheshban Hashanim, according to the calculation of the years, Shenimsa biyadei la'oisei zman shenishba Hashem mi'avra Noach oid al arts, just like God promised He wouldn't put the waters of after Noach's times in existence over there will never be again the floods over the entire world. I also promised the world will not be destroyed that amount of time. And what is that amount of time? That amount of time is the amount of time from Noach until now. So from Noach till now, you have to take off roughly 1,500 years or so from creation. So 5,785 minus about plus minus 15 to 1,600 years, however long it was. I think it's maybe even longer from first man till the flood. Someone has to, I'm sure that could be checked up easily. And take off that time, and the remaining time from Noach till now is the amount of time the days of Mashiach will be. Again, supported by the verse that says, Kimei Noach, the days of Noach, that God was not angry, will not be angry at the Jewish people. Those will be the length of time from Noach until the times of Mashiach. Okay, so this finishes the conversation of how long are the days of Mashiach. We haven't tackled what is Olam Haba, what is the world to come. The verse that we've quoted, Kol Yisrael yesh lam chelik la'olam haba, right? Shneimar v'amach kulam tzadikim. Olam Haba is not the Yemos HaMashiach. Here it gets complicated. And this is why we get into the Yad Ramah. When I was preparing the class a few nights ago, Sunday night, I was in a shul and with a little more access to commentaries, and I started to bring about the Yad Ramah, and I figured, I have to really. I know the Yad Ramah because the Yad Ramah has few publications on Talmud. I think Baba Basra and Sanhedrin. I just want to know exactly who he was. So I'm just going to bring up a small from Wikipedia. His name is Meir Halevi Abulafia. And the Yad Ramah lived, Meir Halevi Abulafia, and he lived around the year 1170 in Spain. Now, what's important to our Talmud over here is he was one of the Sephardic rabbis, because Spain is the Sephardic rabbis, who went out against the Rambam. He was one of the ones who sent a letter to France where they burnt the Rambam, which ended up being a disaster because they ended up burning the whole Talmud. Once the Gentiles started burning Jewish books, they didn't just exclude. They didn't. It wasn't exclusive to the Rambam. You have to be careful when you let the beer into the room. So he was against the Rambam based on our Gemara. Our Gemara, we're now going to discuss how do we understand the days of Olam Haba? What does it mean, the days of the world to come? And we have two opinions. And the Rambam kind of combines the opinions, and the Rambam's opinion is that the days of Mashiach is going to be regular. Olam kiminhagi nog, the world is going to be a regular world, just that there's going to be a king Mashiach, and obviously we have to add the Beis Hamikdash according to Tosfos. The Beis Hamikdash is going to be here, so that's already kind of changing things. And others hold, and according to Rambam, the days of Olam Haba are going to be souls without bodies. The Yad Ramah took strong offense to that idea, and that was the basis of the idea of why he went out against the Rambam, and it's based on our Gemara here. The Rambam actually combines both opinions of the Talmud, which confuses a lot of people. But let's go see what the Gemara is talking about. Okay, so now we know the Yad Ramah actually lived around the time of the Rambam. So he says like this. Omar Rab Chia bar Abba. Rab Chia bar Abba said like this. Omar Rab Yochanan, the name of Rab Yochanan. Kol HaNeviim. All the prophecies about the days of Mashiach is meaning to say that the days of Mashiach, all the prophecies of the lamb and the lion, and all the prophecies about the benefits for the Jews in the days of Mashiach, kulam leinisnavu elimais Mashiach. Those are all prophecies just for the days of Mashiach. Aval oilam haba, the world to come is something totally different. And there we quote the verse, Ayin le'ra'asa, no eye has seen it. So you can't prophesize on something you don't know about or haven't seen. Elikim zulascha, elikim yasil machakaloi. No eye has seen it. God aside from you, who will do for those who await him. To those who await for the days of Olam Haba, they're going to merit to see the days of Olam Haba, but no one has prophesied about it. So anything you read about in the prophecies about the Mashiach is talking about the days of Mashiach. We're not talking about the world to come. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. He lived in the time of Shmuel. They were all students of Rebbe. Well, Preke Chelek, this disagrees with Shmuel. This is a complicated Shmuel. And the Rambam brings both opinions. The Preke Chelek disagrees with Shmuel. The Amar Shmuel, because Shmuel says, Ein ben hoilam haza li'maisa Mashiach el shiv malchus b'vad. That the Rambam says that Shmuel seems to say differently. From literally understanding what Shmuel says, that there's no difference between the Messianic era and this time and this world, aside for we won't be enslaved anymore. Meaning to say that the prophecies about the greatness and all that's going to happen in the days of Mashiach are another date. That is Olam Haba, where now when Mashiach comes, it's just going to be that the Jewish people are going to have their own rule. Now again, we have very clear what the Rambam says about the days of Mashiach and who Mashiach is, and Mashiach is maybe king. And we spoke about last week about the Gemaras of David's going to be king and Mashiach's going to be king. That's obviously talking about some sort of level of the resurrection of the dead, because David has to come back. He says, just to talk right away on Shmuel, Tosfos and Shabbos, who brings down this opinion of Shmuel, says you have to add one thing, because you have to add the Beis Hamikdash as well. Like he says, the Avsha Ata in Yerushalayim ben Beis Hamikdash, Beis Mashiach here called Banui. So right away, Tosfos throws in a wrench that Shmuel says that there's going to be no difference. It's not exactly no difference. You have to take no in context. So let's see what Rashi says. What are we talking about in the prophecy? When we're talking about the good things that are going to happen for the Jewish people, so Rabbi Yochanan says that's only talking about the days of Mashiach. However, the Olam Haba world to come, Ein Le'rasa, the Ein Ketz L'Davar, there's no end to that, because once there's no description. Ein Ketz, when you have no limit to something, it also has no description. Something that is described as a beginning and an end of a pleasure or of something that's happening fits into a space. If Ein Le'rasa means that it's no end to it, so we can't even describe it. We don't understand the goodness of what, or the days of what does it mean, the world to come. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. Meaning to say, but Shmuel, again, the Rambam quotes both these opinions, and the Rambam bases this to say that the days of Mashiach are going to be, the Olam Haba is going to be bodies without souls without bodies. Nachmanides doesn't agree with this, and neither does the Yad Ramah agree with this. So much so that the Yad Ramah went out against the Rambam for holding this opinion. But the ideas of what it means in Moshiach Mashiach, that's why the Rambam has a special preface to the Preke Chelek to understand what does it mean Olam Haba. But let's just continue. He says like this: Om Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says, Om Rabbi Yochanan, name Rabbi Yochanan. Kol Anvim le'disnavu. When we're talking about all the good things that are going to happen, it's only talking about Ela lebali tshuva. This is only going to happen for the person who's a bali tshuva, a person who's a returnee. Tshuva as in a returnee. Aval tzadikim gemurim, but the absolute Reishitz, Dogosh, the emphasis is on the word gemurim, because you could have a tzaddik. Anyone who's learned Tanya, what does a tzaddik gomer mean, right? An absolute tzaddik who's eradicated any kind of level of evil within that person's character, never mind in behavior. But when it comes for the blessings of the tzaddik gomer, that we can't even describe. So the Baal Tshuva, the one who's a returnee, that's the prophecies of what's going to be, what that person's going to benefit, he or she. But the tzaddik gomer, the absolute righteous person, no one's even seen their reward. And this disagrees with Rabbi Avo, because what did Rabbi Avo say? Rabbi Avo disagrees, and he says in the name of Rav, again, these are all contemporaries, Rabbi Yochanan, etc., that says, we have the famous Talmud that says that we're the place of elevation, that the returnee, the Baal Tshuva, the person who does Tshuva stands, the greatest tzaddik, and there's different verses, tzaddik or tzaddik gomer, and there's Ein Sham ve'ein Yecholim Lamdim Sham. The Rebbe always quotes, not only they don't stand there, they can't stand on the level of elevation of the Baal Tshuva. So here Rabbi Yochanan says, in the name of Rabbi Chia says, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that the Baal Tshuva is going to have the benefits of the days of Moshiach, where Olam Haba, the benefits that we talk about of Ayin Le'Ra, said that I didn't see, that's going to be even greater, that's for the righteous. Whereas Rav Ava says in the name of Rav, the opposite, that where Baal Tshuva stands, the righteous can't even stand. I mean, the Baal Tshuva reaches a much higher level. So this is the question, who's higher? The Baal Tshuva, the one who returned, the one who sinned and left sin to come back? And this is a fundamental question of what's our purpose in this world? Is our purpose in the world to be perfect or to do tshuva, right? And this was really, this conversation came much later when the Baal Shem Tov came and said that everyone has to do tshuva. People did not take light to that. We have the famous debate. The Alter Rebbe went to the city of Lodz, I think, I'm not sure which city it was, that he went to debate, and the question he had was, how could you say that a tzaddik has to do tshuva? A tzaddik is higher than tshuva. And the Baal Shem Tov said, no, everyone, even Moshe Rabbeinu did tshuva. Sumari Ravas Vizkarat L'Sham, have to leave here to get close to there. So he says, so this is a complicated question that went through the generations. So what's the verse to support that the Baal Tshuva is greater than the tzaddik? So Reb Avo, in the name of Rav, quotes the verse that says, Shalom, shalom l'rachaik, peace be to peace for the person who's distant, v'lakarav, and only afterwards the person who's close. First we mention Bereisha Rachaik, first we talk about the person who's distant. That first we mention that person, he or she, because of the level of tshuva. And only v'hadar, afterwards we mention Karv, the person who's close, meaning the tzaddik. My rachak, what does it mean the person's distant? So how do we know that rachak, someone distant, means about tshuva? So the Gemara says, rachak demikarav, someone who initially was distant and now became close. Well, my Karv, what does it mean someone who's close? Karv demikarav dehashta, someone who's always been close, meaning the tzaddik, who's never distanced him or herself from Hashem. Let's just see the Rashi. Rashi says, again, this is a complicated Gemara, a complicated debate. The debate goes for years. Again, the days of the Baal Shem Tov came back up. So here he said this. He quotes that according to Rabbi Avo, the tzaddik can't stand, Rashi says. Why? What's so great about that Baal Tshuva? What's so great about the person who does tshuva, that the righteous person didn't do anything wrong in his or her life? Why can't the righteous person stand on the level of the Baal Tshuva? So Rashi says, the gadol koichen shel Baal Tshuva, the greatness of the Baal Tshuva, the person who returns to God. No creation could stand before them, or Rashi adds, according to the brackets, in their mechitza, within their, you can't even stand in their space. You can't even get close to the space of the Baal Tshuva. And what's the support? He supports Shalom Shalom l'Rachik. He says Bereish l'Rachik shenisrachik ben Hakadosh Baruch Hu. First, this person was distant from God. V'ach kachshav I love b'tshuva. And then when that person returns to God through tshuva, v'had shalom now, and only afterwards we say peace l'karv to the person who was always close, tzaddik gomer, the gadol koichen shebal tshuva. Again, Rashi says the greatness of the Baal Tshuva is, and like it says, what is the reasoning behind that? Which is the obvious idea is that the how you look at the sin, basically, according to Rabbi Yochanan, the very fact that they never tasted sin, the tzaddik, that makes them great. On the contrary, Rabbi Avo says no. The fact that they've tasted sin and they were able to overcome that temptation and leave that life to go back to Hashem, that's a greater achievement. It's a question of avoda, right? What's harder? Is it harder to leave something, right? Is it harder to quit smoking or never to smoke in the first place? So you can't compare, right? If you smoke, it's harder to quit smoking. So that, as far as avoda goes, as far as working on yourself, So Rabbi Vo says the challenge of working on yourself to become Baal Tshuva is obviously much greater. He says over here, Rabbi Steinzalt says, the commentaries explain that the superiority of the penitent as stemming from the fact that he has already experienced sin and therefore requires greater effort to overcome his or her evil inclination. That's the Rambam. Others explain that the penitent is exceptional because it appears that he was likely lost. When he repents, God's joy is great. So the question is here who is this? The Yafei HaYeshua, Yafei MaYeshua says that the question is, are we looking at it from God's perspective or the person's perspective? From the Rambam says, from the person's perspective, as a voda goes, to leave evil and go back to God is difficult. But or you look at God's perspective. God's perspective is God could have given up hope on the Rasha, on the person who is a sinner. And now that God sees the person comes back to him, right? What does God say? We're going to learn. God says, Yeravim benevat chazar bach, go back, come back to me. God wants us to do tshuva. He's waiting. We say that, b'chaka, he's waiting for us to do tshuva. So God's excitement of our tshuva is greater for the Baal tshuva, obviously, than the tzaddik is, right? The good son and the bad son question. So here he says like this. The painting is greater than the completely righteous person. In other words, one who never sinned in accordance with the opinion of Rab Abohu. Okay, I'm not sure what he's adding here. So that's the verse that Rabbi Vo brings. What is Rabbi Yochanan? How does he support that the tzaddik is greater? Now, if one is just to slow down and analyze the conversation, you don't have to say they're arguing. The Gemara looks at it like they're arguing. The Baal Tshuva could be standing in a place the tzaddik can never be standing. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't say where the Baal Tshuva is standing. He just says about the reward, that the reward of the Baal Tshuva is the reward of the days of Moshiach, whereas Ayin Lei Rasa is talking about the tzaddik. That reward, we know in life in general, when you reward someone, it's not necessarily reward is based on what you've done. But what's special is not always the reward, A kid comes home with an 80, or another child comes home with a 95, you could be more dear to you, the mark of an 80, depending on the effort the child had to do to get to that mark, as opposed to the mark of a 90. And maybe you're going to gift the child with a 90 a greater gift, because on numbers, that child received the higher mark. But what's dear to you and special to you could be the efforts of the person who achieved the child who achieved an 80. So Rabbi Yochanan could say that the reward for the Baal Tshuva is the Yemos Mashiach, so to say, what we've prophesied. And Ayin Lei Rasa is talking about the tzaddik. It's still not a contradiction to say that the Baal Tshuva is on a higher level, because reward and punishment goes according to what you've done. But nevertheless, as far as what's dear to Hashem, what's special to God, it doesn't have to always mean doesn't have to go in line with the reward. That's just my idea. But the Gemara obviously seems to understand that they're arguing. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Rachik shu rachik ma'avera." So what does it mean that shalom rachik? No, that's actually talking about the tzaddik. That's talking about that person was always distant from sin. Karav shu karav ma'avera nisrachik man. The person was closer to sin. So Rabbi Vo learns the pasuk more literal, that we're talking about close to God or distant from God. And Rabbi Yochanan says, no, it's talking about close to sin or distant from sin. Okay. Either way, the Gemara obviously disagrees with what I'm saying, because the Gemara says they are arguing. So let's continue. But I'm saying it doesn't have to be that way. That's all. Rab Chia says, Varava. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan. Kolan and Vim Kulan, these are extreme Gemaras. The Gemara says, with all the prophecy is only talking about someone who married his daughter off to Talmud Chacham, right? You're trying to marry up, right? So what's marrying up in Torah? It's not money or prestige. Marrying up is you marry a Talmud Chacham. So if you marry your daughter to a Torah scholar, even though you may not be a Torah scholar, so for that you get the rewards of the prophets. But if you actually are a Torah scholar, it's greater. Or you do business to support the Torah scholar, or a person who gives the Talmud Chacham, the Torah scholar, to enjoy from his or her efforts, meaning from your monies. The student, the Torah scholar themselves. So basically, here the question is about Yisachar Zavulun, basically. Who's greater, the Tamchei Dairaisa, the person who supports Torah, the person who studies Torah? So even though Samach Zavulun Mitzaysecha V'Yisachar B'Ohelecha, even though Yaakov mentions Zvulun before Yisachar, Reb Chia bar Abba says that nevertheless, as much as we appreciate those who support Torah, the support of Torah doesn't close to the actual Torah itself, and therefore the prophecies. Again, what we're seeing here is one thing for sure: is the prophecies about the rewards that we know that are described are much lower than the prophecies, or about the idea that's not the ayin le'rasa, the ideas that the eye hasn't seen. Something that the eye hasn't seen is closer, is higher, and therefore cannot be described. No one's seen it. So anything that's been described is more for someone, a tamcha d'oraisa, someone who supports Torah. And it's interesting, he includes someone who supports Torah, someone who marries into Torah, right? Marries his daughter off to Talmud Chacham. What was the idea basically? Rashi spoke about that, right? Rashi's daughters, they all married Rashi's daughter. Rashi's daughter is a great Bas Talmud Chacham. There's a whole thing about that, the ideas of the students, the grandchildren of Rashi. They're all married from his daughters. I think Rashi raised some of his grandsons. That was the idea, that in case, what's the idea of marrying a Bas Talmud Chacham? In case in case something happens to you, the grandfather could raise them. I think that's one of the ideas. All right, what's now we said that there's something that the eye hasn't seen. So obviously everyone's excited. What is it that we haven't seen? So my ayin le'rasa. So of course we don't leave it at an unknown. So I'm Reb Shua ben Levi. Reb Shua, the son of Levi, says ayin hamashumer ba'anovav mishesh mebraces. It's a kind of hidden wine that its grapes have been kept from the 6 days of creation. We know the 6 days of creation means to say before the sin of the tree of knowledge. So before sin has been incorporated into the world, there's things, and there's things kind of hidden for that time, and that is the kind of the gift that whoever we're talking about, the Olam Haba or the Talmud Chacham, etc., or the Baal Tshuva, is going to enjoy. So it's talking about special wine from the grapes of the 6 days of creation. Rish Lakish says Ze'eden. Okay, here we're going to a very interesting concept. We all talk about the Garden of Eden, but everyone knows when you say Garden of Eden, it's not just a statement. There's Eden and there's the Garden of Eden. So we're talking about the Garden of Eden. The eye has never seen Eden itself. Rish Lakish says Ze'eden. No one's ever been in Eden, because even Adam, first man, God put him in the Garden of Eden, right? The garden is outside the house, wasn't let inside. So you're saying, where did the man live? We just said no one's seen the Eden. So he says, Began, he lived in the garden. The garden is not Eden itself. Maybe you're going to think that Gan Eden is one thing. It's not that there's a garden of Eden. So we have a verse to support differently. The Torah says, "V'nahar yoytze mi-Eden." The river, the original river before it split into four, left Eden. Lahashkis is Agan to irrigate the garden. So the water came to water the garden. So it left Eden, and Eden, no one's ever seen Eden. First man was in the Garden of Eden. Okay, this obviously, in Kabbalistic teachings, goes very deep into the difference between Eden and Garden of Eden. What is the river? The river is Bina, understanding. Garden of Eden. Eden itself is Chachma. Ayin Timatze. Wisdom is Eden. Gan is the Midos, is the emotions, because like a garden, it's Sameach, things that grow. When you use the knowledge to excite your emotions about God, that's the idea of the Nahar, the river, which is Bina, understanding, that goes and waters the garden. Okay, so that's the idea of Chassidus in a nutshell, explains the concept of the Garden of Eden. So the Rabbi Steinzot says, and we're going to finish off here because now, I've liked to have gone into the next subject, but we went a little slow today. So Yayin HaMashumer, what is the hidden wine, the preserved wine? So he says, as wine symbolizes complete happiness. So this is a parable stating that unadulterated rejoicing and delight is designated for the righteous and is an inherent in every creation of the world. So it's there if you could tap into the pure delight of something that hasn't been corrupt by the sin of the tree of knowledge. Other commentaries, just finish off over here. Other commentaries say, what is the idea of the Ayin HaMashuma, the hidden wine or the preserved wine? So like a person who sometimes drinks to kind of get themselves out of their reality, in a negative way. So the idea of the ayin mishumar is to take out of the reality of the negativity of this world. The Eitz Yosef says, he goes into kind of explaining a little Kabbalistically that the idea of that first man was only in the Garden of Eden, not in Eden itself, is similar to what I said about the idea of Bina, understanding, and Chachma, wisdom, whereas the garden is the world of emotions, is that it's all about levels of revelation. So the Adam, first man, and that's why we say that Mashiach, who's going to teach Torah even to Moshe Rabbeinu, and we're talking about the days of Mashiach, and we're talking about Olam Haba, that Mashiach is going to be greater than even Adam before the sin, because even Adam before the sin was in the Garden of Eden, but not in Eden. Means he only had access, and that's why he was able to sin. The sin of the tree of knowledge is because he was lacking the connection to Chachma, which is the wisdom. If he had the connection to the Chachma, he would have stayed on course and not have sinned. But when you live in the world of emotion, things are a little differently. All right, everyone. Let's stop here, I think. And Mr. Shem, next week we're going to start with the continuation of the Mishnah that goes into the question of what does it mean, a person who doesn't have a portion of the world to come, a person who has negative views or different or the wrong views about Torah study, and what is the tradition of the Masoros of Torah. All right, thank you all for joining. Laila Tov. Oh, sorry, before I go off, I see there's 3 chats here, not sure what it was. Okay, just the side notes. All right, thank you very much for joining. Take care. Laila Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.